Hey guys, it's Quincy, and you're listening to the Social Drop In. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Social Drop In. Today am going to be sharing a little bit about my weight loss journey. It's definitely been a ride, so buckle in. It's going to be a lot of information and sort of emotional topics and things I've learned along the way. So, yay! I'm glad that we're here, and let's dive right in. I want to kind of start by talking about where I started to kind of think about my weight. Obviously, when you're a little girl and you're going to school and doing clothes shopping and stuff, you're not really thinking about that until you get to about a certain age. When you start to become a little bit more aware of your body and other people's bodies, I never really seemed to have a problem with mine. In fact, my mentality about food and eating and dressing and everything didn't really seem to be affected by the standard. I remember actually it was like a specific time where I was younger, where I was getting dressed, that I started to um, notice that my body was kind of different, and it came down to other people's comments that was made about my body that has, in fact, to this day, almost 30 years later, still remained in my brain. So here's your first tip. Be careful about what you say. Do not comment on people's bodies. It will definitely stick with them. While I was kind of like growing up and stuff, I really had this mentality that I did not want to be bound to a diet. I didn't want to be bound to a, restricted calories, or that I was going to be doing anything except for living my life the way that I wanted to. I kind of believed in moderation and I tried to practice that. However, in a lot of ways, my childhood didn't have a ton of, I guess, discipline that was exposed to me. I don't mean this in a negative way, but I just think that there is a lot of strength that comes from learning how to discipline yourself, whether that's coming from school sports or getting like A's in your class or just keeping up with studies in general. When it comes to eating, I think it also plays a part in that, and I think that I developed some negative eating habits in my childhood. I can actually recall that I remember my mom actually, she used to work nights, and my dad didn't really know how to cook a whole lot, so we ate out. And I remember he used to pick me up from school, like daycare and stuff, and it was right, like my daycare was right behind Taco Bell. And so pretty much every day my dad would take me either to Taco Bell or McDonald's, just trying to, or something else, like just trying to make sure that we were fed, and that, it was all out of trying to take care of us and everything. But to me, it just like created sort of like this lust for fast food, which is something that probably started around like 6 years old. And it's funny, still to this day, I still eat my same Taco Bell order that I used to order back then. So that is sort of like where these negative habits started. I think as I continue to get older, I remember that this is such like kind of a shameful memory of mine, but I remember that whenever I wanted to drive, I remember the one thing that I really wanted to do is go to Subway. Like, that was what I wanted to do whenever I was finally able to drive my car. It wasn't like, oh, let's go pick up my friends and go to the mall. It's like, I can't wait to be able to go to Subway. And I don't know what it was, but I just remember seeing this girl one time with her car keys in Subway, and I was like, I can't wait to be that. It was like not a core memory, but something I still, again, remember to this day. So kind of a weird little detail there, but it kind of paints this picture of like where this lust kind of came from. Moving into more of like when I moved out of my house, I moved when I was about 17 years old, 16, 17, out of my parents' house, and I moved to Austin. I was still fairly thin then. I was at this point taking like diet pills. I was struggling to sort of like, you know, fit into what I wanted to be when it came to college. I started to walk to school every day, and I lost a ton of weight, which I loved. But by the time that I moved out and got into my own apartment, I met somebody and I started just eating, eating, eating. I remember this person taught me about the Whataburger patty melt, and holy shit, the amount of Whataburger patty melts I've put down in my day. Oh god. It's actually crazy too, looking back at it, like how many calories you consume when you're eating. Right now I'm actually doing the 75 hard, and I am calorie counting and like tracking my food and everything. I'm staying within a caloric deficit, and it is insane. So by the time that I got out of college, I started to really sort of like rely on eating fast food. I didn't even know how to cook chicken at the time. I was still struggling to learn how to do laundry. There was a lot of things I was trying to figure out as I was kind of new into this whole, living on my own situation. And as the years kind of progressed, I continued to try to learn how to cook a little bit more, but then I really just started to continue to eat fast food. It got to a point where I was like, I never felt shame for what I was eating because the person I was with at the time was eating just the same amount as me. However, they had absolutely no shame about their body. They were very like free and careless, and like they just really owned who they were, and I really appreciated that, and I kind of reflected my own mentality after that. And it actually got to a point where, and just to give you some context, I am 5'1". I weighed over 240 pounds. I started to really notice the weight whenever I was living in my apartment, and I had the stand up mirror, and I remember that my boobs actually got bigger, and I was like, what's going on? Like, I had lost all this weight walking to school in college, and then here we are like a year and a half later basically, that I'm starting to kind of see my body change. And I want to preface this by saying that there's absolutely nothing wrong with your body whatsoever. I think this story is all about like me and my journey with both mental health and just sort of my eating habits and my relationship with food. This is my own story, and I don't think that it could reflect to anybody else. I think everybody's body is beautiful. Even back when I weighed 240 pounds, I think I was beautiful, but I just struggled to see it. I think the same compliments that I received today also were the same compliments I received back then. It's all a matter of like how you view yourself. So if anything, if you're listening to this and this resonates with you, please know you are beautiful no matter the size that you are. You're very smart, you're kind, you're making me emotional. Anyways, I just wanted to say that. But back to what I was saying. Once I started to see my body start to change, I really started to become in denial about what was happening. I remember as I continued to eat those fucking patty melts, I started to see my body shift a lot, and I started to think that it was something medical. And at this time, I was still like under 26, so I was definitely way under 26. So I still had health insurance through my parents. And I remember I was going to the doctor because I was going to get all my blood work tested because I really thought that I had like PCOS or some type of like thyroid, something wrong. I was really trying to figure out any and everything of why I was gaining so much weight. And I never took a look within. I couldn't even like look within and see that it was my own habits that were contributing to my weight gain. And another part of this is kind of a body dysmorphia aspect. I also couldn't see my body change the way that it did. I would look at myself and I would still feel like myself when I was taking diet pills and walking to school every day. It felt like I was just myself, and I felt like I was really, honestly, no change had happened. That was really hard for me. I was stuck into sort of like this wave of denial all around. By the time that I started to realize that this is my fault, is where I started to like turn into a little bit of self-loathing. I started to kind of resent myself and my decisions at this time, and it's when I really decided to just sort of let everything go. It was almost like I had saw what was happening and what I was doing to myself, and I just was defeated, and I was like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to keep doing it because I'm already here. And that was a really, really negative thought process because it did ultimately just get worse. I started to hate myself even more. I stopped posting online, which is, if you know me, I'm always posting online. Like I've always, since I was a kid, I've always took pictures of myself and posted them on any type of social platform or something. But I wouldn't want to be in pictures anymore. I would stand at the back of the room. I wouldn't really share my voice. There was so many things that I was like keeping myself out of because I was so ashamed of myself. And that does a lot to you. There were multiple times where I started to get a gust of motivation. I remember one time I went into a gym and I did like a whole body composition where they weighed out every single whatever on me, and they gave me sort of like a workout plan, and they told me that it was going to take a year and a half to lose the amount of weight that I wanted to. And I was shocked. I was like, no. Like I don't want to wait that long. I want to change right now. Like I can't even imagine doing this for a whole year. My it was like a nightmare basically going in there and being told that I couldn't lose weight faster. And again, it sort of just discouraged me all over again. And then maybe like 6 to 8 months later, I had another gust of motivation. I was like, "You know what? I'm going to I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to try this. I'm going to do it." And I remember that I was like trying so hard to eat healthy and to work out, and it was just so hard for me to even go for a walk outside. Now, I live in Texas, and so it is hot majority of the time. But right now, I've been going for a 45-minute walk every day for the last like over 2 weeks outside. And there are plenty of opportunities to work out outside that don't involve being hot in the sun. And I think that that was something that was like a truth that I wasn't ready to be real with myself on. Ultimately, I never decided to take my health more seriously. I kept giving up and feeling defeated every single time. I really just sort of let everything take me down and keep really struggling to feel better about myself. I remember when I met my friend Alex, he's the one who actually shared with me about bariatric surgery. He had gotten the gastric sleeve, which is a bariatric surgery where they remove 80% of your stomach. It leaves you with sort of like a banana, sort of like the Dominican bananas that are really tiny. Um, it leaves you with so much less of a stomach that I remember being told it's less than 2 ounces that you can consume like right after surgery, which 2 ounces, to put in perspective, is a shot, a Texas shot. So that was insane. But I remember him answering all my questions about it and sort of just like helping me sort of process what this meant. It obviously sparked some motivation in my head. I remember one of the things I asked him was, "Can you still eat Taco Bell?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, cool, I'm in." Once I learned more about the surgery, I did what I could to reach out to the insurance company and figure out what exactly I needed to do to qualify. I needed to have an extremely high BMI, which I did. I was considered morbidly obese by those standards. I also had to go to a doctor to prove that I was written off that I should have that surgery. And it had to include like high blood pressure or pre-diabetic. It had to have all of these different things, one or the other, to basically qualify. And I don't know, 2 out of 5 I definitely got qualified for, so that sucked. But it gave me the thumbs up. So once I started to do that, I had to go find a surgeon. And I remember looking online and just calling a bunch of them to try to find out more information. After I started to figure out that my insurance was going to cover it, it came down to sort of the money aspect. And I remember calling around asking how much it would cost to get the surgery at different surgeons' office and sort of getting a perspective there. And that's how I narrowed down the doctor that did my surgery. From there, I had to get a psychological evaluation that proved that I was mature enough basically to handle this surgery and that I wasn't on some type of like psychological break and things like that. Once I started the process of getting my surgery, I decided to take a step back from social media. I thought it was something really shameful that I was doing. I remember that I was thinking to myself, how this was the easy way out and how because I couldn't like bring myself to do it that I was just sort of cheating. And I remember I actually had somebody tell me that and it just really hurt. It really is just something that I held on to in my heart, and it was also like I was judging myself even going into this, and it was really hard even leading up to the day. I was so scared, and I remember my parents came into town to sort of like send me off into surgery. And when I got out of surgery, my life changed. And I don't mean in like the, oh, I was so pretty, I believed in myself again. No, my life changed because literally from that day forward, I was struggling to understand myself even more. One of the things that they tell you after you get surgery is that you have to take in a minimum amount of protein and water and minerals and vitamins and all this stuff. And I, for the life of me, could not put down even any water. It was hard for me. It would hurt my stomach whenever I would drink too much. Obviously, I'm still recovering from like a pretty invasive surgery, so it was hard for me to like tense up my body. And so every time that I would drink, I'd have to take the tiniest sip in my mouth. And it's really hard to get hydrated when you're taking sips. So that was a real big struggle for me. Additionally to that, I didn't want to drink even protein shakes because it was just too filling for me. And so at the first week, I was so malnourished that I ended up back into the hospital for an entire week on my birthday, which sucked ass, but I was having to stay there for an entire week, basically by myself too, so that sucked. But while I was there, they were feeding me with TPN, and if you don't know what that is like the food that they feed you through the little tubes. That was really hard. My body was so malnourished of like even vitamins and stuff. I remember I had to get a PICC line, even just into like, I don't know if you know what a PICC line is, but it's like right on your bicep, and they have to put in basically like a line directly into you. But I remember they had to put potassium into the PICC line, and that was the most excruciating pain I think I have ever felt in my life. That was so incredibly painful. And I think there's only one other time in my life that I've had that much pain. Oh, it's when I got my lips done recently on my period. That hurt like a bitch. But anyways, that's trivial things compared to what I was experiencing then. Once I was able to kind of regain a little bit of my strength like a week later into the hospital, they came in and they basically told me like, look, if you're not going to be able to continue this at home and actually like really handle it, you're going to have to be put on TPN at home, which meant that I was going to have to bring home one of those like, the things that they put the IV drips on. They were going to make me take one of those home and like have to pay for a subscription of these packaged food bags. And I was just like, whenever I heard them tell me that, I was just shaking my head like, hell no. And I was just like, hell no, this is like way too much. This is too much. At that point, I was like over it. I was like, no, I'm going to go home. I'm going to do it. And from that point forward, I really took it seriously. I even got an electric water bottle that would like beep every time it was time to take a sip of water. It sent alerts to my phone. I really started to like try to do it, and I had to get adjusted to my new lifestyle. From there, I remember pretty soon after I had the surgery, I tried to go eat Taco Bell. The most painful experience post-surgery was second to that. I tried to eat, I remember some beans, some refried beans, and some pimento cheese. Those were supposed to have the most like protein or whatever that I can consume that was like soft foods. And yeah, that hurt so fucking bad. Imagine not being able to drink water but tried to go eat refried beans. It tells you how much my mental state was still not where it needed to be. One thing I learned about during surgery was addiction transfer. It's something that I think I still struggle with today. I think it kind of comes down to the person. I know that after you have surgery, you are more likely to get addicted to something in exchange for the food addiction that you might have had, whether it can be drugs, whether it can be sex, whether it's drinking. I experienced a little bit of addiction transfer to drinking. However, I'm really have been working on that. Obviously, this has been 5 years, so it's something that you can't just change your mind overnight, but I've definitely been dealing with that one for a while now. Once I started to get a little more familiar with my body and being able to understand what I could and couldn't do, that's when I really started to see my body change. And I went from 240 pounds to 213 pounds. That was just the removal of my stomach, believe it or not. And from 213, then I went down to like 190, and then you know how it goes. So it was like a very rapid, fast weight loss. And I think within a year, I had lost 110 pounds. And as I mentioned in a previous episode during my travel episode, I mentioned a little bit about how my mind wasn't quite catching up with what my body was experiencing. I, again, was stuck into this mindset of body dysmorphia, which is really tough. I couldn't see myself losing weight. I could only see myself as the girl that had to go into surgery. I really struggled for a long time to see my progress, and it only started to show me whenever I started having to buy new clothes because mine just weren't fitting anymore. That to me was very exciting. I started to sort of believe and grab my confidence back, and I was able to sort of begin the whole process of rebuilding my self-love. I remember one of the things that I told myself back then is I really wanted to go to Peru, but I wasn't going to do it until I had the stamina to climb up Machu Picchu. And that is still a goal of mine. I'm actually more athletic in this moment now than I have been in all of the 5 years, actually. So it might be time to book a trip to Peru. Maybe I will. That would be a great trip next year. Peru, Argentina. Don't watch this, Bran. Anyhow, I started to see my body change, and it was such an incredible experience because I really saw all of the smile come back into my face. My confidence was back. My eyes were glowing. I felt like I had this new outlook on life. And it came down to sort of at that point changing my attitude. I know that I spent a lot of time hating myself prior to the surgery, and some even after. And I remember I just had this attitude of just being pissed off at the world. It took me a while to actually just notice that a lot of my feelings that I had was actually just a projection of really how I was feeling within. I started to really work on myself at that moment. I started going back to therapy for sure to try and ease whatever pain I still had in my heart from what damage I did to myself. And now I was starting to fix a little bit about my body image issues and my body dysmorphia. And it wasn't until I decided to go on a trip by myself to basically, it was a solo trip for 5 weeks to Hawaii, Australia, and New Zealand. That trip I mentioned a little bit before in a different episode about how kind of mind altering that trip was. The cliff notes of that is that I did so many things that were so sort of freeing, as well as mentally challenging, scary. I experienced so much intense travel and emotion and feelings of loneliness and feelings of how grateful I was to be alive, how grateful I was to be able to have the stamina to do the things that I was doing. I felt the most confident I ever had, and the way that I kind of share that memory is that my mind finally came full circle in what my body was experiencing. That was really the part of my life that really changed. It wasn't after the surgery, it was after that trip, because I was finally whole again. And I remember when I came back from that trip, within 24 hours, I ended a 6-year relationship. I moved out of this house. I started to live alone. I quickly after that started a business. I got with my husband, and life really just changed for me. And I'm grateful to the surgery for doing that, but I'm also really grateful for that trip. Fast forward to now, 5 years later, what I'm experiencing currently is a transition, another mindset shift. I think a little bit of that addiction transfer has transferred into alcohol. I've experienced excessive drinking pretty much since the surgery. I have found it really easy to get drunk back then. It was really only half a drink and I would feel pretty fucked up, which is cool. I was a cheap date, but also it led me to really overdoing it. At a certain point, I actually never thought that I had a problem because I wasn't blacking out, but then I learned the term browning out, and that was something I did almost daily for a while after the surgery. It was an interesting experience being 22 and going into living in Austin, Texas by myself as a girl, being on dating apps for the first time. It was a really strange process, meeting people through bars and dating through the bar scene. That was really strange. I didn't really know how to do any of that stuff, and obviously I learned, and a lot of it was through drinking. I learned pretty shortly after that living in Austin is really just faced all the way around drinking. So here I am now, 5 years later. I have taken several stints, months at a time, of not drinking, all very healthy. Currently, right now, I'm doing 2.5 months of no drinking, so that'll be nice. I've been working out the most right now, doing everything that I can to be the best person that I can. I still have a small stomach. I find myself eating still about half the portion size of most people. Sometimes I can eat more and it does still hurt, but for the most part, I'm able to eat what I want to eat. I find myself sometimes making the poor decisions. I am very lucky to have had the surgery that I had and had all the experiences I've had after be so positive. It's not been an easy ride, and I also want to mention that the mindset of that this was an easy way out absolutely is horseshit, because the amount of mental strain of experiencing life after surgery for that first like 6 months was harder than I think if I would have just gone with that year loss weight plan. I am not joking you. That was like learning how to walk all over again. That was hard. I respect everybody in their struggle. I respect anybody who wants to live their life the way that they want to. I would never ever judge somebody for the way that they look, what they want to eat, what they lack thereof. I'm never going to make comments about people's body. It has nothing to do with me. And if somebody needs encouragement or motivation or ask me about my surgery, I'm more than willing to talk about it. Recently, I had a friend who went forward with weight loss surgery, and I've seen them just come back to life. You can see that it brings such a glow to people and their confidence. I respect anybody's, whatever they're going to do, I respect it. I will state that there is a huge difference in the way that people treat you. From the time that I was over 200 pounds, people treated me like I didn't exist, that I wasn't there. They would ask me questions, but I felt like I wasn't heard. And whenever I lost weight and was like looking just so paper thin is when people really started to pay attention to what I was saying. I got more compliments, more people looked at me. It was a really interesting experience. I think, if I'm being honest with you, people are shallow, and I think that's what I sort of learned and realized, is that it doesn't matter what people think of you. It only matters how much you think about yourself in a positive way. I think self-love is really something that is the story here when it comes to weight. I encourage you to be grateful for the things that you do have and start to try to love yourself that way first, because once you can learn how to love yourself is where the real healing begins. I know that sounds really cliche and very like Hallmark movie of me, but if somebody were to give me those cliff notes and I could have heard this, I think it would have maybe helped me take another look at my relationship with myself. If you listen to this story and you have any questions, or you'd like to start a discussion about weight loss or weight loss surgery, anything, I would love to have a conversation with you about it. And I hope I can be of motivation to you in any way that I can. Thank you again for tuning into this episode. It was sort of one that was hard for me to talk about. Obviously, this has been a huge part of my life, and I'm happy to be sharing it on this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.